So yeah, I think you can say, a person might say, well, you can't scientifically prove the existence of God, but I think if you take the time and you look at it, you can absolutely see it.
Right.
I think human genetics and the human body is the perfect example. There is just no way in hell that we evolve to this level of complexity. It runs completely against the grain of all the law of thermodynamics. In fact, evolution is the only science that gets a complete pass where the law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy is involved. It rules all other sciences, including chemistry, which would be the foundation
Hmm.
for evolution. But as soon as that chemistry branches into evolution, suddenly it's like, oh, well, that's different.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of people try and bring up, things like radiocarbon dating, and a lot of methods that are considered scientific that have a lot of holes in them. Namely, with radiocarbon dating, there's a problem with the isotope that they use and the fact that we've set off, nuclear weapons all over the world since, and basically it's ruined our ability to really accurately test those things. And then they started moving to other isotopes because they think that those isotopes might be unaffected by radioactivity. There's a lot of stuff that you can look into that. All that I would say is that if you really, really believe that, I would highly, highly recommend going and looking into all of that on your own. Do your own research, get all that information for yourself. Don't just trust something that someone tells you because they say that it's science, because they say that it's the truth, because there's a lot of liars out there in the world today, and
Yeah, good.
unfortunately, a lot of them are working in our education
Yeah,
system.
and a
So,
good example of that is so as an example, I'm looking to see if is there any actual scientific observation
mhm.
where scientists have witnessed a positive mutation. And you know what I keep finding? It every time I dig into the internet looking for that answer, I always consistently get these articles where they say, "Oh, well, here's an example of evolutional mutation," and it'll be something like this dog got hairier because it was colder, or this bird's beak got longer because it needed it to, or something
Right.
like that. First of all, it's not evolution, it's not new mutation. A new
Mhm.
mutation is when there is a new change in the genetic code. That anytime you get something like, oh, well, this dog didn't originally have a lot of hair, and then when it started getting bred up north, it started growing more hair, or these people have this gene that protects them from this virus or whatever. All of that information is already written in the DNA code.
Right.
It's already there waiting to get provoked
Mhm.
so the body will bring it forward and apply it. It is not a mutation and it's not evolution. It's pre existing and it's
And I
adaptation.
believe that there was a video that was put out by Answers in Genesis recently. That a very, very good YouTube channel if you want to go and check them out. I don't know if they have a Rumble channel or not, but you might want to see if they actually put anything out there. They tackle that question, and a lot of, at least as far as I understood it, was that the genetic code for something like, let's say for example, claws, has to exist within the genetic structure for that creature before it can actually come out through mutation anyway. Like if you were talking about mutation in this sense, so a lot of what they call mutation in evolutionary theory would be considered adaptation when you're considering creation. So and I think it's two words to say the same thing with different biases. But that said, when you're talking about genetic code that has a specific set of sequences for specific things, and then let's say, for example, that you have a genetic sequence that includes the sequence for claws, well, then that animal can have claws at any particular point through that creature's adaptation. But the problem comes in with reproduction because that creature is only reproducing with creatures of its kind. And so you can't introduce new information into those genetic lines if there is nothing outside of that genetic mutation that can actually breed with it. So,
Yeah,
for example,
you literally have to take two creatures,
right.
cut the genes, and put them
And,
together.
and more often than not, DNA actually becomes a lossy type of
Yeah,
sequence. So, more often than not, you're not gaining anything when it comes to the genetic sequence. You're
right.
actually losing things. You're losing code. You're
and
losing.
that's observable science.
Yep.
So that's the other thing. People say evolution is you're evolving, you're becoming something more efficient,
which
more
again, I would say
functional.
actually goes against the laws of thermodynamics,
It
because we're talking
does.
about closed systems and we're talking about creatures that are, complex organisms, and evolution would wager that those complex organisms become more complex as time progresses.
But what
But
we're
thermodynamics says the opposite, right?
right,
That
and
they
what we're
degrade and become
actually
less complex.
observing, what's being observed in genetics, is that just about every generation is picking up 100 100 bad codes from their parents.
Right.
So literally, we're getting weaker genetically. We're not ramping up, we're ramping down. In fact, is one geneticist that I was listening to, and I can't think of his name right now, had said that literally, if nothing inhibited mankind over the next, uh, I think he figured 200,000 years, mankind will die out
Yep.
within 2,000 years because just through his genetic decay.
Well, I'd
So if
believe that.
so, if we know that mankind is genetically dying, if we're
Right.
at this point on the timeline, and we know at this point we're going to die out,
Right.
then there also has to be this point where it began.
Well, of course, they're not going to let that happen. They're going to come up with all kinds of innovations to meld you with machines and everything else to
I think
keep the line
mankind is
going.
probably perfectly capable of that, but
Yeah.
that isn't evolution,
Right.
right? You're
That's
having to
something else.
interfere and inject yourself in the genetics in order to stabilize it.
Although I guess some people would try and rationalize it
And I
out.
don't necessarily think it can even be done. There's some
Yeah.
speculation that people are starting to get a grasp of what the aging process is and stuff like that.
Right.
But that proceeds an even more important philosophical question
Right.
about how long do you really want to live, or maybe in your mind it's like, hey, I don't care if I die as long as the human race goes on. Well, yeah, you
What good
wouldn't
is that?
care because you're dead. You're dead, and if there's no God and you're just dead and you go in the ground and that's the end of you, then there's no meaning to your life,
Yeah.
there's no point to your life, there's no purpose in your
You
life.
live to continue humanity.
Some people will say, well, legacy, but what's that going to matter to you? You're in the ground, you
And
don't
not only that,
exist.
but legacy always falls away unless you're some kind of ancient pharaoh or something like that. Anyhow, right?
Yeah, even Alexander the Great, who controlled the entire known world at one
Mm-hmm.
point, um, you'll ask somebody, hey, who's Alexander the Great? No, I think I heard of that guy. So even a guy that controlled the entire known world is quickly being forgotten
Right.
by 90% of the people on this